We see your screen.
Great. Thanks so much, Kara. And thank you everyone, for joining us today. So as Kara said before, I'm Laura Arrington, and I am the Family and Youth Education Coordinator here at Starbridge. And just to keep in mind, we are still here and open to answer any of your questions, concerns, as well as to present these great webinars to you today. So what is disclosure? It's really a decision that you, the individual with a disability, your family makes about sharing your information with others and your disability. Disclosure is really about a person-centered approach. And I'm going to share with you a little bit about my son, John. He is the reason why I'm here today to talk to you. And I'm going to share a little bit about who John is. John loves drawing. He draws all day long, and we go through a lot of drawing pads. He loves music. He loves to sing. He struggles with being able to verbally tell you long sentences, but he can sing you the longest songs you've ever heard. He is a son, and he is a brother. He loves to go bowling when it's open, and he loves to go to the mall, throw pennies in the fountain, 100 to be exact, just in case you were wondering. He loves to read. He loves books. He loves to go on vacation. And John has autism. So when we talk about disclosure and we talk about a person's disability, it is a piece of who they are, but they're made up of many pieces. And that is an important piece of when you start to talk about disclosure, who someone is. They are the person at the center. So when we start the journey of disclosing, it is helping our children understand who they are and being able to express that to whoever they may feel is appropriate. So the big question, when should I disclose, or when should we start talking about it? I like to say it's never too early and it's never too late to talk to your child about their disability. With that being said, I think it's important to honor each family's decision on when to start those discussions. Having a discussion about your child's disability does not mean they have to immediately start disclosing their disability to everyone they know. It's a journey, and it will look different for each family. So I just want to take a moment, if you could open up your chat boxes and maybe just share with us, have you talked to your child about their disability? And Carol will share your answers. And it's okay, there's no right or wrong. There's what do you feel is comfortable for you, or with the people that you're working with or helping to support? Have you started talking to them about their disability, or do they know? So if you're a teacher or a human service provider, you may say, I think they know about their disability, or I'm not really sure how much they really know or understand their disability.
Laura working, a few people typing in that yes, they have had that conversation. And as a parent myself, I would say too, the important part about it for me was not just disclosing about the disability, but being able to advocate for what he needs or doesn't need in terms of supports, because that's another big component as well. And I had another person comment that someone at school said something to him, and so they asked their parent, which is one of those times where it may start. And another person commented that they haven't really talked to their son about it because they feel he might not be able to comprehend it or understand it. And one other person commented, so they haven't really discussed it in detail. And so I think for many of our audience, they're kind of figuring out when is the right time, which, as you shared, there's no real right time. But for some too, I think it's how do we help our children to understand what it is we're disclosing with them.
Great, thank you. And thank you so much for taking the time to share that with us. As you can see, it truly is a journey. Everyone starts at a different point. And that's why I'm glad you're here today, because you can learn more information about what is right for you, your family, or for helping someone that you're working or supporting. So, why is it important to talk to your child about their disability? Well, I usually encourage people to share a diagnosis. When a student maybe becomes frustrated or is commenting like, why do I have to leave for every test? Or I feel like I'm not like the other kids, or why is things so much easier for everyone else? Sometimes that's around 7 or 9 years of age. They start to notice that they're being pulled out for services and might start asking questions. Um, for our family, we started about the time right before my son hit adolescence. But prior to that, when he was young and in kindergarten, we grabbed a book called My Son Has Autism, as you know, When My Autism Gets Too Big. And it was a very simple, easy picture book, and we wanted to explain to him sometimes why he may feel his frustrations. So we shared that with him. And sometimes when he was having a tough time, we'd say, John, it looks like your autism is getting too big right now. A good friend of mine, they decided to not tell their daughter, well, until late middle school. And what happened is they disclosed that, and she became very angry with them when she learned from her parents that she had an IEP and why she was being pulled out for tests. She didn't want to be pulled out for tests, and she thought she was kind of punished for it because she was the last person to finish an exam. So that's why we're going to talk a little bit too about why it's important for children to start participating in their IEP meetings and to talk to your child about what supports and services they need to be successful in school. So family concerns, big ones. And we heard some of those today. I've had every one of these. What if it upsets my son or daughter? What if they become upset with me because I didn't tell them sooner? What if I can't answer all their questions? As a family member, you have concerns too, and that's okay. That's natural to have concerns. And part of this is starting to have discussions about why you may feel that you have these concerns, and maybe seeking out what would happen. What would happen if we told them? What would happen if I can't answer their questions? What if they did become upset? And how would I handle it? And working through that, maybe even working through that with a friend. Remember, we as parents won't live forever. We want our kids to be able to stand up for themselves, learn how to self-advocate. By standing up for yourself and learning how to self-advocate, we also protect our children and we honor who they are as a person. So it's important for your son or your daughter or your niece, nephew, grandchild to understand their disability and how it impacts them. So they'll be able to tell people what they need to be successful in school. Often when I'm working with families who have children in late middle school and early high school, I'll say, have you talked to them about their IEP? Have you talked to them what's on there? One of the things that's really important on an IEP is present levels of performance. Sometimes you hear them called PLEPs. Through the present levels of performance, I'll say, have you read that to your child? And say, what do you think? Does that sound like how you learn and how you think? And sometimes they may say yes, and sometimes they may say no. Important information for them to understand. Do you know that you are allowed extra time on a class assignment? Do you know you're allowed to be pulled out for tests? They could say, I don't want to be pulled out for tests. I'm going to give you some really great advice that someone gave to me once, and it said, school sometimes can be a safe place to fail. I didn't like what they were saying to me at the time, But if my child didn't want to be pulled out for tests, sometimes you have to let them see why the support and service may be helpful. And sometimes as families, we learn maybe they didn't need that support and service. So it's about self-advocacy. So when we start talking about self-advocacy, it leaves and it provides them freedom to examine and question things. Um, Medication they may take. I was working with a really great family who, when their child got older, their child said, you know what? I no longer want to take this medicine. I don't feel I need that. And I don't like how I feel on it. And they said, okay, it happened to be a medicine that they could take them off right away. We're going to take you off and let's talk about how you feel every day. 2 days later, their child came back and said, you know what? I think I'd like to try it back again. It's all about learning. It's about empowering and feeling in control. It can provide them greater freedom to communicate in certain situations. It allows other people to get involved and help support them. It could be employment specialists. It could be educators. It could be people at a college. It also gives them a greater circle of support of people who know and understand them and can help provide what's called supportive decision making. It's allowing the person with the disability to grab their circle of support or the people who are around them, that trusted people of, like, let's say when they want to stop or try a new medication. Again, I always tell you, if your child is on a medication where it's it's prescribed through a doctor, always include the doctor. Always talk to the medical professional to find out how you can or cannot take someone off. It could be a life-saving medicine. So please know that. So I definitely want have that conversation, but maybe include your child in that conversation as well. So questions to think about. Does your child understand their disability and how it impacts them? Can they explain that to a teacher, a friend, an employer, a recreation leader, or other people who help them, or to a friend? It's interesting. I have a really good friend of mine who gave me permission to share this story. Her child has a learning disability, and they're allowed to use a laptop for all their tests. Well, they were taking a midterm, and they weren't given a laptop. The student remembered about 30 minutes before the test was going to end. His mom came to me. She was really upset and said, hey, the school should have provided that. They didn't tell, my child until halfway through the test. They were able to then, type it up. But that they should know that. And I said, you're right. They should. Does your child understand that that is something that they are given? Have you talked to their child about how to advocate for that service even prior to the test starting? Like, while we failed at this piece, how can we improve at this piece? And then I said, what is your child's plans for after high school? And they said they will go on to college. And I said, this is a great opportunity to help them start advocating for their needs. Because when you go to college, and we're going to talk about this later, and they don't ask for their accommodations, no one will give their accommodations unless they ask. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later, about what that means and what it looks like and how to do that. But these are great steps into helping our children gain independence, and there's things that of course they can be put on their IEP. We see the question of John will learn how to advocate on an IEP. And I always say, what does that mean and what does that look like? What does advocating that John will learn? How does he learn to advocate? Let's break that down into steps and teach John that. Also, it also helps them understand what other supports and services that they need to be successful. And those are those accommodations. Some of them can be on an IEP, others don't. It's wearing headphones in loud situations or on a bus. For my son, we always used to keep him in his backpack, so he could decide day in and day out, and I would remind him that they were there. For another person, It could be use of a laptop and knowing why they get that. Now, the beauty of this use of laptop is that almost every school now provides students with Chromebooks. So it's not unusual for students to have these. Getting extra time on a test. How much extra time? How much is too much time? It's extra time and leaving a room, or just leaving a room and no extra time. What does each person need? Remember, when you're sitting there at your child's IEP meeting, it is an individualized education plan. It is not an everyone. So what does your child need to be successful? What are the changes or things we need to do to help your child access the general education curriculum, feel included and feel participated not only in school but within their community, and excel in their education, their job, their community? So how can adults support youth? We can teach youth about their disability and assist them to recognize what are their strengths, their skills, and what supports do they need to be successful. Again, if your child is getting double time on a test, does this work for you? Does it not work for you? Do you need to be in the front of the classroom, or is the front of the classroom too distracting? By doing this, we encourage independence and skill development. So again, I have another question to ask everyone to type into your question pane. And I want you to really think about this. What is the number one thing that they say parents need to teach their high school student before they leave school? So think about that for just a moment. What is the number one thing that parents need to teach their high school student before they leave school? So feel free to type that in the chat pane.
Laura, while they're typing that in, I just want to share, one parent shared that their child is actually sitting in and listening in on this webinar with their parent today. So it's super great to know that that is happening.
Oh my goodness, thank you and welcome. I love that. I'm so happy to hear that. I can't even tell you. So, and there could be people to say, I have no idea.
Well, and we're starting to get some great ideas then, like how and who to ask for help, the ability to self-advocate, because the colleges don't really listen to the parents. Another person agreed with the importance of the self-advocacy. Another person commented about taking responsibility for your own actions. Another mentioned about how to be dependent and advocate for themselves.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I love that. So, the number one thing that parents need to start to do, I am totally guilty of this, before they leave high school, is to teach them how to wake up via an alarm clock or your cell phone and wake up independently and start their day. That is the one thing that on the road to self-advocacy, I am so guilty of that. And I constantly do check-ins because you're like, they can't be late for the bus because I'm not driving you. And we continue to wake up our children as opposed to helping them and setting a goal of how do you gain independence. Step one is being able to wake up and get where you need to be every day on time. So I always found that to be very interesting. But I have to tell you, those are awesome questions. And every single one of them is true. So there are many choices ahead for our kids. They will be making choices. You will be making choices every day. We need to help teach skills such as asking for help, expressing an opinion, and sharing information. Encourage youth to speak up for themselves rather than relying on an adult to do this. I am totally guilty of this. That's why I put this in. My husband reminds me of it every single day. Sometimes it's a protection mode that I do as a parent. But it's important. I always found it interesting. I had this strange moment. We were in the store one day, we're going through a checkout line, and the person at the checkout kept asking my daughter all these questions. And I looked at her and I said, Sweetie, answer her. And she goes, you always told me not to talk to strangers. And I went, yes, you're so right. What a confusing message we give our children every day. I don't want you to talk to a stranger unless I tell you it's okay. Well, how do they know? How do they know who's a stranger and who is okay to talk to? How do we help them? How do we help you when you get to college, when you get to a job? Say what you need to say and feel again included within your community and in your life. We want to teach self-determination. Self-determination is a concept reflecting the belief that all individuals have a right to direct their lives. They have a right to say, here's where I want to live, here's what I want to do to make my life fulfilling, and here's how I want to start and do and interact every day. How do we help and support them with that? Well, we want to start by teaching our children to accept themselves, respect themselves, value themselves for who they are and what they have to offer. Every single individual has gifts to offer. We have strengths and we have challenges. And when we know what they are and we're able to understand them, we can help them move forward. So how do youth exercise self-determination? Well, by doing it, it starts to teach them to make informed choices. Think about their future. Where do you want to live? What do you want to do for work? And how do you want to spend your leisure time? We all have the right to do this, and so do our students who have disabilities. How do they direct their own IEP? How do we help them ask for accommodations? Learn about their strengths, interests, and what they need. It starts with talking to them, asking them. I will tell you that when we have families who call and their child has gotten suspended, and let's say they got angry and they kicked over a desk, I will say, have you chatted with your son or your daughter and asked them, what happened before? How did you feel? What was going on in your mind? And sometimes they'll say they can't express it. Sometimes they'll say they felt like they went from 0 to 60. Still, good information and insightful into understanding that some things set you off. What happened before and how are you feeling afterwards? Talking about those kinds of things. Talking about whether you like broccoli or you like green beans or you just don't like vegetables. As adults, we get to choose what we eat. We always want to help our children make healthy choices. But when we understand that you mix in a variety, we give them the ability to make informed choices about what they want in their life and how they want that. It's about providing really opportunities for youth to make decisions. They make these every day. They choose a path every day. How do we help and guide so that they can be independent? It's okay to have people you don't like around you. You can say, I don't like this person. And for some of our youth with disabilities, being able and having the power to say no can protect them and keep them safe and keep them from being a victim. So when we talk about that no one has the right to touch you or put their hands on you, you have a right to say no. This is a step into gaining independence, keeping our kids safe, and empowering them. So we want to set goals. So talking to them, where do you want to work? I'd like to work on cars. Well, why do you like to work on cars? How do we get them? What services do we need to access? Do we need to call Access VR and start putting it on our child's IEP? Are you interested in doing a VOPRO program where you have the ability to do that? Well, where do you want to live? I want to live on my own. I remember when my daughter was 5, she was like, I'm never leaving home. Next year, she's getting her own apartment. So things change. How do we get you to live on your own? What does that look like? What supports would you need? Do we need to teach you how to grocery shop, budget money, um, learn how to pay bills? Again, we tie it all back to that IEP, and we want to put those skills on there. And I want to have fun with my friends. We can have social emotional goals on an IEP. How do we make friends? What are programs that we have that can help our students learn how to make friends? Sometimes they do have friendship groups, and that they can teach people how to be a friend and how to be a good friend. This is really important. We need to allow youth to take risks and make mistakes. Remember when I said that sometimes school can be a safe place to fail? We don't want to see kids fail a grade. We don't want to see kids get suspended, but it can be a safer place to make mistakes. We call that dignity of risk. And it's interesting because one day my son's teacher called me, and during PE, they were riding bikes. And my son kept taking the bike and crashing it into they were outside, but crashing it into the bleachers. Then he was crashing into other kids, crashing it into, the big football goal post. And she called me and we talked, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to work on this. And I talked to my husband, and my husband said, you know what, when I was his age, at the time, I think John was 12, he said, I was like riding my bike off of the roof of the shed. I was making ramps, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. And he said, no, that's typical. And I said, oh my goodness, I don't know if John's ever scraped his knee. Now, I'm not telling you to run out and throw your kid out there and say, go ahead, scrape your knee. But I didn't realize that I spent so much time trying to keep him safe. I was allowing him experiences and risks. So we kind of built a few little ramps, and we said, this is what you can crash into. He actually built like a little wall that he could kind of crash into. I remember telling the teacher, and she thought I was going to be just total crazy. And she was like, okay, I get it. And I go, you're trying to carve out the piece of he may crash into something, fall down, and cut his knee. And we'll clean it up and we'll help him and he'll learn. Um, and again, it's dignity of risk. We all take it as typical human beings, but do we allow our students? And again, remember, we don't want anyone to get harmed or hurt, but keep that in mind as we move forward. So when should we start involving our students? Well, remember, it's never too early, it's never too late. But according to the Individuals with Disability Education Act, students of any age can be invited to participate in their IEP meeting. By age 14, by law, they have to start transition planning and they have to start inviting the student. Now, we hear this all the time. It's going to be a very negative meeting. I feel that they're going to put a lot of blame on my child. Well, let's talk about how they can participate. What can they do? Could you help them prepare a statement? Could they come in and read the statement about what they like, what's working this year, what's not working this year? And before we get involved in a discussion, they could leave. A lot of us have cell phones. Could they videotape themselves giving a statement? Again, I encourage what is working, what is not working. I remember sitting in a CSE meeting and we came up with this great plan to help and support a student. I turned to the student, I said, what do you think? And they said, I don't really have a great relationship with the school social worker, but I really like the school psychologist. I go, okay, new plan. We have to involve them. We have to hear them. We have to listen to them. We have to find out what do they need. When they tell us, that's the step into self-advocacy. And we do need to listen. So start to think about what your child can do. They could draw, they could sing. We had my son come in and sing a song for his IEP meeting or CSE meeting. So great things that you can do. So self-determined means supporting youth. Includes self-determined goals in the IEP. So how do we get there? How does John gain independence? How does John um, self-advocate? What does that look like? Feel free at those meetings to say, when you write down John will gain independence, you don't walk into high school and automatically know how to talk to a teacher, how to question a grade, how to ask a question about a homework assignment. These things are taught and they're learned. So we need to put them on there with support. John will ask for help. He will ask the resource teacher for help when he doesn't understand the homework assignment. These are great things we can put on an IEP. So one of the most important decisions you will make as a person with a disability is whether or not to tell someone about your disability. You don't have to tell everyone you know, but I am going to get into explaining why is it important for us to know as the public, as your friend, as an educator, as a support person, how we can help you. What happens when we go to school is we are in the land of entitlement. You have a disability. You qualify for this disability. But when we exit school, you, being a person with a disability, it sort of changes, as do the laws that protect you and provide the accommodations you may need to be successful in post-secondary learning or the workplace. You now get into the land of eligibility. And what are you eligible for? And how do you qualify that? Graduation or exit from high school doesn't mean the services and accommodations you need in high school aren't needed anymore. They still may be needed. Lots of young people think that once they leave school, their disability is unimportant, but it's still there and it's still important. We have to help and support them figure out what the academic services and accommodations they received while in high school and how they will look different in life going forward. So we have a couple of things. Again, once you graduate, you are no longer entitled to services and support. You become eligible for adult services based on your particular situation, your disability, and your ability to disclose necessary information. So what would be the advantages? Well, it does allow for reasonable accommodations through work, school, community, and even activities. Once you do that, it's something called ADA, or the Americans with Disability Act, and it provides legal protection against discrimination. It can give a clearer impression of what the expectations are for the job and what do you need, and it ensures you are getting what you need to be successful. Now, I've worked with many families on this, and I worked actually with one family that had a child who was wanted to go into a program where they had to be able to lift 50 pounds in order to be successful in this job because of their physical disability, and it was for the safety of others that they had to be able to lift 50 pounds. They physically couldn't lift 50 pounds. So for something that is specifically required for your job, such as being able to lift and drag 50 pounds, they weren't able to do that job. So for example, a bus driver needs to be able to lift and drag, I believe it's 50 or 80 pounds up and down the front to the back of the bus. If you're not able to do that, and you say, well, I have a disability, that is part of the health and safety of the job. So that may not be an appropriate job for you. But let's say you're in a job and you're on a computer all day and you have vision issues and you need larger print and you need a screen that can do larger print for you. That's a reasonable accommodation. But if you didn't disclose that, they don't know about it, and you could get fired from the job for not being able to do the job because they didn't know about your disability. So, disclosure about having a disability, again, please know it is a personal choice. However, it's important to keep in mind that in order to be eligible for accommodations under the Americans with Disability Act, ADA, you must tell the potential employer during the interview so that, or otherwise your window of opportunity for reasonable job accommodations becomes closed. Once you're fired and then you disclose, it doesn't matter. You need to do it prior. And I know that there is some reluctance because you're worried maybe they won't give me the job. Technically, if you meet the requirements for the job, then you should be allowed for that job. And you shouldn't be discriminated against. So it's rights and responsibilities under the law, while IDEA is the law that protects you while you're in school. The Americans Disability Act protects you outside of school and can also protect you once you get into the college. ADA, the individuals, protects individuals from discrimination, and this is what the law says. No individual shall be excluded from participation in, denied benefits, or subject to discrimination under or denied employment in the administration of or in connection with any such program or activity because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, age, disability, or political affiliation or beliefs. This can help your child have protections. So what happens when you go to college? Well, again, you're not legally obligated to disclose to anyone that you have a disability, though finding a healthy ownership of your disability will be to your advantage. Disclosing a disability can open up doors, since colleges and employers are not obligated to ask if you need accommodations. Even when you disclose your disability, most employers and post-secondary schools will not offer accommodations unless you ask. This is very different from when you were in school. Your school was required to provide you with supports you needed. Now it's up to you to identify, within the guidelines of the Americans with Disability Act, what accommodations you need in order to work or to learn. Many colleges, almost all of them, have what's called the Students with Disabilities Office. So it's services sort of provided, kind of provided under the IEP. But remember, your IEP does not go with you to college. What goes with you to college are your accommodations. You don't get specially designed instruction delivered by a special education teacher at college, but you can get tutoring, you can get extended time, you can get notes provided, you can get extra time. You have to ask, and I encourage everyone who's thinking about going off to school to talk to the office of the students' offices with disabilities and find out what documentation they need. The majority of them need an updated psychological eval within your last 2 years of high school. So this is really important as you start in your, if you end up being a student who is starting in 11th grade, or maybe you're taking another year, you need an extra time to get your Regents or your local diploma, but you want to start making sure that that psychological evaluation is up to date. That is usually what the colleges want, and they want to look at what is your disability and how does it impact your learning, and then they'll talk to you about that. So it's really important that you do that, because you can work with the Disability Services Office to discuss what methods or what you need to help you communicate your accommodations to your professor. To make this process easier, you can request an accommodation notification letter from the Disability Service Office verifying you'll be using accommodations. Accommodation letters do not disclose what your disability is, but you must register with your Disability Service Office in order to receive accommodations in your letter. Again, please visit the office, your college office, to find out what information that they need. Once you get out of school, if you needed an updated psychological test, you're going to have to pay for that, and they can be quite expensive. Schools should be very familiar with this need for students, especially 11th and 12th grade students. Please don't ask at the end of the year of 12th grade. It might be very hard to get that information done. If you don't put in at college, and I hear this from professors all the time, that you need testing accommodations, and certain colleges have so many days that you have to ask beforehand. If you don't request that, you do not get that accommodation. And there is no do-over. So I cannot stress you enough. As much as we'd all love to run off to college with our kids, we just can't. So I want to leave you with this. By teaching our children about disclosing their disability leads them to empowerment. It leads them to being able to self-direct their life and get the supports and services they need to be successful. And so with that, I will open it up to anyone who has questions. I know we talked about a lot of things, and feel free again here at Starbridge if you have even more questions or you'd like to talk with us one-on-one, I encourage you to give us a call at 585-546-1700, and we would be more than happy to discuss anything that is pressing or that you have concerns about. So with that, I'll open it up.
Hey, Laura. So we've had a couple people commented on the brilliant ideas that you shared about involving students in the IEP meetings. And another person commented about how some kids aren't ready or don't feel comfortable asking for help when they need it. So adults in the room also need to check for that understanding. So some great points being made.
Yes.
And when you discuss the component about employment, one person asked about the disclosure, would it be during a job interview or after an offer has been made?
It could be either one. Either one. I always encourage at the interview, and I know that can be scary because people feel that it could be something where they would not hire them. But again, they're not allowed to discriminate. So if you felt that you were discriminated because you disclosed your disability, I would encourage you to have them call. You could call our office, and our intake specialist will put you in touch with someone who can help and support you through that as well. But either one is good. It just helps them to know and understand what equipment. I've worked with people with severe learning disabilities, and they use Dragon Speak because the typing piece with dyslexia was really challenging for this person. And the company bought Dragon Speak. They're an amazing person and presenter. They just needed an accommodation. So great question.
And then, Laura, we have several that are tied to the whole college aspect. So someone actually made a comment about how ADA requires the college to offer accommodations, and some of the for-profit colleges are technically compliant, but they make it hard for students to access the accommodations. So you should always check before you register. So a good point when you're kind of exploring your different college options. And
Yes.
Another person asked about 504 versus IEP. Which one goes with you to college?
Okay, so technically, neither document, quote unquote, goes to college, but you can show your IEP, or because on the IEP, what you may have is updated psychological testing, and it may be on your 504 as well. Again, when you're thinking about going to a school, you want to talk to the school. Ask questions, maybe get online, ask about their Office of Students with Disabilities. I've seen some really great Colleges do amazing things for students with disabilities. And yes, I have experienced others that aren't quite as, that make it a little more challenging. So you really want to find out what do they need, and 9 times out of 10, they need updated psychological testing, what can be done by the school psychologist before you leave school. And then with that, together they're going to decide, do they need, because it's not necessarily double time goes with you, but having an IEP to show, updated psychological testing to show how your disability impacts your learning, then allows for the accommodation and for them to be able to have that. Even, having a scribe or a test read. So again, it's what does the student need? How does it impact them? But there's no committee that will review the accommodations. And I've worked with graduate students with disabilities, and they needed extended time to work on a project, which actually kind of bumped up against being able to take an exam. And I actually worked with them and the college and the Office of Students with Disability Services to be able to get that student that accommodation of extra time to do the project and then being able to do the test, because they couldn't complete the project without being able to do the test that went along with it. And we were able to show that with their disability, they were allowed extra, the test to be bumped out. So it can be done. Sometimes they need help understanding how they can be creative.
Great points. Thanks, Laura. And someone else asked a great question about, do you want to relate any stories about the college students and the residence halls or the need to live off campus?
Oh, that is great. Actually, I'm so glad that person brought that up, because it's interesting. I'm going to encourage any family who is having a student go off to college, because when you get to college, please remember if the student is 18 years of age, they will not, and I can not stress this word enough, they will not disclose anything to you as a family, and they don't care if you're paying the bill. So check out things like, one of the things we encountered this year, we actually had a few people who called because they had chosen a college where I guess in the fine print, it said that they aren't ever able to live off campus and that they have to stay on campus for all 4 years. And the student said, well, I have a disability and here's why I need it. And they ended up trying to make accommodations for the student, but they wanted to move off campus. And according to the school, they were providing a single room, they were providing a quiet dorm room, and they weren't allowing the student to move off because they had like 4 exceptions: that you were married, you were in the military, you lived only less than 20 miles from the school. And so sometimes it gets sticky and tricky with students about those types of things. And sometimes you're having a disability, we may not be able to get you the support and service that you need, such as living off campus and having your own private residence. We weren't able to do that. We weren't able to get that for that student this year. So I do encourage you, especially if you're going to an upstate or even up north school, to please check those types of things, because as much as we tried to work on why they needed it for their disability, they found accommodations within that. So good questions, good things to think about. I never had that one come up before, so it was really interesting. And so now we are encouraging people to please look at that before you apply to a college.
And Laura, what do you think? Time for one more question?
Yes.
All right. So another participant in the audience was wondering if you have any tips during this time with COVID-19 that we could help build some of these self-advocacy skills.
Absolutely. I think those are great. There are things that you can work on at home, and I've worked on these with both of my children, is when you talk about, teaching someone to self-advocate is practicing with them talking to someone and asking for an accommodation, or talking to a friend about something you didn't like, and doing that role playing with them, of them being able to find the words to process that out. Um, Asking them, checking in, how do you feel today? Validating how they feel. We all know, going through this new process, that sometimes we have good days and sometimes harder days. And how do you feel on the harder days? Why is school tough? Especially, there's a lot of online learning right now, and I know that families are feeling resistance to that, and talking to the student about what is a good time of day for you to start working. And I am someone, and I like to get up, I like to shower, I like to get on my computer, I like to get my work done. My daughter likes to get up at like 10 or 11, and she's in college and she's got classes, all stuff online, but she will work later in the day because that's her best time to work. So talking to them about that, because again, what works best and what time works best leads into, if you're going off to college, do you really think having an 8 a.m. class is going to be good? What classes do work for you? What kind of job works for you? Do you need a job with more flexibility, or do you need a job that you have to be there at 8 a.m. every day? You could be someone who the struggles with getting anywhere on time, so maybe you need a job with a little more flexibility in it as far as start time. Or maybe we need to teach you how to start being on time. And you could say, at 10 o'clock, we're going to sit down and you're going to work on the schoolwork, and here's the alarm. I want you to set an alarm on your phone, and we're going to do it. And it could be visual pictures. Remember, everybody learns different. It could be a written schedule. It could be a visual schedule. You could start looking at it. What does it mean to be ready to start your schoolwork? And that is part of, what do you need to go to this class? What do you need to be ready to do this online learning? Do you need a pencil? Do you need paper? Talk to them about that. Do they need to take a picture of it and put it on their phones so they can look at that to be prepared? Or do they need to just write out a list? So there's so many things that we can help during these times of helping to gain independence, be in more control, and feeling like you have control over things during these tougher times, but then transferring it back into school, of what does a finished project look like? And how does my student know that? How does my child know that? And what are the tools that we can give them so that they can independently access that? How do they independently log on? How do they independently look at what work they have to do? And do we take a picture and screenshots of the screen, and we can do it on their phones so they can walk through the steps? Do we write it out? What do we do to help them gain independence?
That's great. And I also just want to acknowledge some of our participants have been asking some great questions that are relatively personal in nature, that sometimes there's extra little pieces that we can get at by having that phone conversation. So I encourage anyone who has chatted in some of those personal type questions or has questions after the webinar finishes, put in the chat box our main line, so that way you can feel free to reach out, because as Laura said, we are still here and happy to support you as you are moving forward during this time.
And you may get a call as a blocked call. And we always try to tell families that we're all working from home right now, but we'll call on our cell phones. It'll come up as blocked. We'll leave a message and say, hey, I'm going to call back in 20 minutes. It'll be a blocked call. Please pick up. We can talk through email, but we are more than happy to chat with anyone. And again, what we do recognize is everyone's situation is so unique, and we want to be able to help and support you through your family's unique concerns and questions. And we do have a really great webinar next week, done by one of our trainers, Sue Wyatt, and that is creating a vision for your child, which is really important and ties into all of this. When we create a vision for your child, we are helping them gain skills and understand not only what's important when they're younger as a family, but what's important to them, and them being able to articulate what they want to do with their lives and self-directing their life.
All right. Well, I just want to thank everyone for joining us and give you a reminder that you will receive a survey in your email as a follow-up to today's webinar. Laura, we just thank you for your wealth of information and expertise that you shared with all of us today. Based on what I've been seeing in the questions pane, a lot of people are walking away with some valuable information. So thank you for that. And thank you everyone for joining us. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.